I'm the 5th District Councilor for the City of Syracuse, and lead exposure was one of the main things that made me want to run for office. When I saw this problem, I thought, I really want to be involved in trying to find a solution. And I thought simply that the issue was that nobody was paying attention to it, and then as I got into office, I realized there's a load of really great people working hard trying to figure this out. And as we've studied other municipalities that have done well, other counties that have done well with this, we keep hearing that breaking down silos of information is one of the keys to having success, that the county is in good communication with the city and codes and the health department, and that all these different organizations are working together. And one of those key organizations is the development community, landlords, and folks who are actually working in housing. So we've called this town hall today to talk about some of these issues and try to let people know what resources are out there, best practices, and so much of the problem with lead can be maintained and improved through just simple maintenance and taking care of the property. So we're trying to do the best we can to get information out there and to break down those silos and really start communicating. So as I said, we've had great partnerships so far in this. We've got some of our great partners in the room today. And the first person I'd like to introduce is someone who's made this a priority for his administration. He's been a great partner leading the charge on all this. County Executive Ryan McMahon, ladies and gentlemen.
I want to thank Joe for emceeing this. Joe, as many of you know, is very comfortable behind a microphone. I don't know if you're going to freestyle for us later on or not, Joe, but I want to thank all of our partners here and folks here from the public, from the community, from the building community, the real estate community, property owners. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
We're good? Okay. But needless to say, this is a public health issue that is more than worthy of all of our attention, specifically property owners. And there's a special responsibility for those property owners who are renting out their property to tenants. And we've built these great partners over the last few years and really highlighted this effort. And many of that came from many people involved civically in the community. Joe mentioned what got him interested in public life, and there's many others who have highlighted this issue. And I think throughout this process, folks have realized that there has always been lead programs to address this issue. It is no one's fault that their home was built in before 1978. And most of the homes in our villages, in our city, in some of our towns, all have lead in them to a degree or not. The issue is when that lead is exposed and when young children are put in harm's way because of that exposed lead. So we focus very much in on carrots and sticks, and getting information out to the public, and trying to put together partnerships that will really drive resources, information, and then if folks are going to be irresponsible, have to face the consequences of their behavior. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of our great partners here. Obviously we have the City of Syracuse here, Deputy Mayor Owens is here with Councilor Driscoll. The Community Foundation, Home Headquarters, 211, our great county departments are all here. The amount of work our county health department does, our social service department, our Department of Children and Family Services, community development. I know I'm probably forgetting someone, so I'm sorry. But the work you all do every day to protect our most vulnerable people is amazing. Certainly our district attorney, Bill Fitzpatrick, is here. The work that he has done really helps strengthen our follow-through on this, and the DA has been an advocate for this community's most vulnerable for so long, so I want to thank the DA as well. In addition to that, this first forum is really focused in on lenders, realtors, landlords, developers, builders, code officers, property managers. Hopefully you get something out of this, and one of the things that you should get out of this is that at no point in our county's history have we had more resources available to address this issue. In 2018, the city and county were successful in a joint application to HUD and received a $4.2 million grant. In addition to that, the Community Foundation and Home Headquarters pledged another $2 million to that. This momentum, this outreach, this community engagement from many of our public sector partners and civic partners led to Congressman Katko being able to bring in HUD Secretary Carson to our community, where there was a robust roundtable discussion, not just on funding, but better ways to implement the funding to get to more people, whether it's not just an income-based approach, but maybe look at outside the box, maybe just look at census tracts, any home in that would qualify. And those are discussions we're still having. And because of that discussion last Friday, I really want to give a lot of credit to Congressman Katko with this. He brought the secretary here. We had this conversation. We learned that the County of Onondaga received a $5.6 million lead grant last Friday, which is just tremendous. And that money will be spent where the problems exist and where the need is the most. And we'll be targeting that with our friends in the city government and also any villages or towns as well. So we're very proud about the efforts to date. We know we need to continue to be innovative and figure out ways to get to people and test young people. And that's what this is all about. So we want to thank you for your participation, and hopefully you'll get something out of this, and maybe that's even a big grant. So thank you all for being here. And Joe, am I introducing our next very, very capable and great public servant, our Deputy Mayor, Sharon Owens.
Thank you, County Executive. On behalf of the Mayor, Ben Walsh, I'm pleased to be here. I feel like I'm coming among family. My career has stretched as a proud alumni of Home Headquarters Incorporated and working under the previous administration in neighborhood and business development. And so I want to take the opportunity likewise to thank the county for taking the lead on this very important issue. Also to thank our Commissioner of Neighborhood and Business Development, Stephanie Pasquale, who is a champion for housing development in the city of Syracuse, and you'll be fortunate to hear from her later. Our Code Enforcement Director, Ken Towsley, who is not here, but is tireless in helping us to address issues, code enforcement issues. And you should all know, as investor owners, allies of yours. His prospect is to work with you to address issues that can help improve the housing of the people of the city of Syracuse in particular. When I walked in, I ran into a couple friends. They're property owners, and I said, "Good to see you. I'm glad you're here." And they said, "You know, I'm just here because I want to learn more, and I know that's why you're here, and I'm thankful that you're here for that purpose. And I'm going to remember that you're here for that purpose because you're in this fight with us to address housing." My Head Start years helped me remember that lead is a vicious enemy of ours. And children's brain development, and preaching to the choir for most of you, start in those preschool years. And lead directly attacks brain development. And so our children who need an equal opportunity and an equal start in life find themselves, merely by the fact that they actually live in a house that was built before 1978, potentially find themselves at a disadvantage because the lead in their house is affecting their brain's development. And I think we all can agree that that's unfair. But what we're here to talk about today also is, how can we help you help them? And so that's why we're here today. We thank you for being here. We thank you for wanting to know more. There is a plethora of opportunity, and then you're also going to teach us something too, with your questions, and what may be barriers for you to also work on and improve and help relieve and abolish lead poisoning, because that's what it is in our community. So I thank you for being here, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you to Deputy Mayor Owens. And yeah, as she said, it's definitely, I want to thank all the people working in housing who have come today, because it's a partnership. When we talk about this, we always think about the sticks, but the carrots are very important as well. There's a lot of resources, there's a lot of opportunity out there for property owners who are concerned, and there's a lot of ways that we're trying to help. So with that, I'll introduce some of the people that are carrot guardians and distributors. Some of the people that are the most on the ground champions of this issue that have worked so hard on it. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Katie Bronson with GHHI, Green Healthy Homes Initiative.
Well, I would like to also reiterate and thank you all for coming today, because as many people have mentioned, this is just not one municipality, one organization, or one person really solving this issue. It is about the community solving this issue. So back in 2017, at Home Headquarters, we've been the project administrator for the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative for the past 4 years. We decided to create a lead poisoning prevention action plan. And we involved a number of our partners and stakeholders, as well as some community residents and organizations. Throughout that process, we really identified that everyone has a role, and our role depends on if we own properties, if we're landlords, if we're renters, if we work for a municipality or a nonprofit, and how we play that role. So we've really sort of identified, all the different levels of where lead can come into play. When we're talking about some of the policy, we're often talking about, federal, state, and local laws. And, some of the things we will be talking about today include the disclosure law, the EPA Renovate, Right, and Repair law, as well as the New York State Public Health law. But we'll have a number of partners throughout our discussion today talking about all of these different laws and how we can really participate and who to contact when you have questions about that. But again, really, what the main point here is that, we as a community really need to take some next steps and find out what our role is and how we can move it forward. At Home Headquarters, I've been working with a number of healthcare partners through the Health Foundation for Western and Central New York. We recently finished a video, and this video has a very specific target audience, because again, we wanted to make sure we're speaking to people who are living this and how we can empower themselves to move forward. So we have a draft video that we are going to show you guys today, and we are actually going to be improving it, because when we did this video through our fellowship program, it was during the winter, and so we could not do outdoor shots, and so we have some areas that we'd like to improve. But you as property owners, we'd like to get your feedback on what would help property owners, renters, and our residents throughout our Onondaga County and City of Syracuse community to be empowered to have a lead-safe environment. So how do we start the video? Is that going to be next slide? All right.
Hello and welcome. Today, we will be talking about how to stay safe from lead hazards in and around your home. Lead can be found in many places around your house, including paint, pipes, air, dirt, dust, food, dishes, and water. Lead can be harmful for all people, but is especially dangerous for children under the age of 6 and for pregnant women. Most homes built before 1978 have lead paint in them. When the paint peels, cracks, or is worn down, the chips and dust from the old lead paint can spread around your home.
When you and your children walk into the house, it's a good idea to take off your shoes at the door. If you have pets, be sure to clean their paws when they come in from outside. This may stop dirt, lead paint, dust, and other hazards from getting into your house. It also helps to use a doormat at every entrance to trap dirt and dust. Look at the inside and outside doors in your home. If you see any paint chips or dust, clean it with a wet wipe or a wet mop. Do not use a broom, because that could cause the chips or dust to spread. Check the siding, porch, garage, trim, windows, and doors outside your home for peeling paint. Dirt can have lead in it, So make sure children play on the grass instead of in the dirt. If you have a vegetable garden, keep it away from the house, driveway, and drip line. Dirt could have old lead paint chips or dust, so it's best to create a raised bed garden using dirt bought from the store.
Eating healthy foods helps to protect against lead poisoning. Foods with iron, vitamin C, and calcium can help prevent lead poisoning and should be included with every meal. Eat in clean places that have a lower risk for lead exposure, for example, at a table instead of on the floor. Always wash your hands with soap and water before eating a meal or snacks. It's important to check your dishes too. Traditional pottery, fiestaware, and ceramicware may contain lead. Look for a label that says lead-free. Don't eat from dishes that are for decoration only. If you're not sure if a dish contains lead, don't use it. Lead can also be found in plumbing. Make a habit of letting the water run until it's very cold before using it. Only use cold water for cooking, drinking, and making baby formula. Boiling water will not remove the lead. Faucet or water pitcher filters can help, but make sure it is certified by NSF International by visiting nsf.org. You can test your water for lead. For more information, call EPA's Safe Drinking Water Hotline at 1-800-426-4791.
Make sure the rooms where children play and sleep don't have lead in them. Keep the crib and play areas away from walls, windows, and doors with chipping or peeling paint. Clean your windows every month. Use a wet wipe or cloth for cleaning dust or chip paint. Do not use a broom because that could cause the chips or dust to spray. Paint chips may taste sweet and appeal to young children. Keep your children away from windowsills, especially if they are teething. Be sure children do not put their mouths on the windowsill. Some vinyl blinds may have lead in them, so keep children and their bed or crib away from the blinds.
Lead is sometimes found in children's toys and old furniture. If a toy is damaged, throw it away. If a toy has dust on it, clean it with a wet cloth. To find out if there are any lead recalls, sign up for the recall list at www.saferproducts.gov or call 1-800-638-2772.
Clean your home every week. Vacuum with a high-efficiency particulate air vacuum or HEPA vacuum. Use a wet mop to clean floors. Wet wipes work well to clean dust, and you can throw them away when you are done. Do not use a broom because it can cause paint chips or dust to spray. If you're planning any home improvement projects, ask your contractor for their lead safety for renovation, repair, and painting, or RRP certificate. If you are doing the work yourself, take the RRP training to help you understand how to keep your workspace safe during renovations and cleanup. During your home improvement project, be sure children and pregnant women stay away from the work area.
Wash your hands and your child's hands before and after eating, after playing, and after changing a diaper. Children under the age of 6 years old are at the highest risk for lead poisoning because they tend to put their hands and other items in their mouths. Lead can affect a child's growth, their behavior, and their ability to learn. At the age of 1 and 2, have your child's blood tested for lead by their healthcare provider. It is a law in New York State and is important because young children are at a greater risk for becoming lead poisoned.
Some jobs and hobbies may involve coming in contact with lead. This may include painters, artists, construction workers, and people who fish. Take off your work shoes before entering your home. Change any clothing that you think may have come in contact with lead. Be sure to wash your hands with soap and water before having contact with young children. Wash your work clothes separately from other clothes.
Exposure to lead can create many health problems that can last a long time. Be sure to test your children for lead at 1 and 2 years old. Use the wet cleaning method whenever you're cleaning your home. Keep your home safe from lead by following the tips shared in this video. If you have any questions, contact the Lead Poisoning Control Program at the Onondaga County Health Department at 315-435-3271 or visit www.ongov.net/health/lead.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. And if you are interested, if you have comments, suggestions, like I said, we are going to be reaching out to some people to do some focus group questions. So you can sign up at the home headquarters table out front, and also learn about more of our home improvement loans and projects we have available. Next, I would like to introduce Deb Lewis. She is the lead program coordinator at Onondaga County Health Department.
Hi everyone, thanks for being here. I feel like the video pretty much did most of my work for me. It covered a lot of the material that we talk about with families every day. Very simple and straightforward tips that you can use in your home to keep your family safe from exposure to lead. The health department's role and our specific activities are outlined in public health law. All of the activities that we perform and provide to the community are defined by very specific regulations that direct our activities. One of the things that a lot of people don't know about our role is that in New York State, every single test result that's reported to the state health department then gets pushed out to all of the counties. The county then has to accept responsibility for the test result and take specific follow-up actions based on what the child's test result is. We are also required to provide follow-up services that can include care coordination, linking families to services. We work with our great partners at DSS and the City Codes Department. Often with many of the families we're dealing with, lead is just one piece of the puzzle in their life, and they require assistance with getting connected to the right person to meet the need that they have. The other follow-up service that we are required to provide for any child with a test result over the state's threshold is what's called an environmental risk assessment or lead inspection. Many of you in the room have had an inspection in one of your units and have met many of our inspectors in the past. How our inspections work, what's required of them, and what's required of the owner to fix the hazards that are identified is very specific to the risk assessment that's done under public health law. And it's a little different than what you would experience through a code enforcement inspection or any other kind of home inspection. Environmental risks are determined by paint being intact or not intact. And our inspectors use specialized equipment to measure whether or not lead is present in any non-intact paint. We coordinate a lot of our activities for families with local agencies like Home Headquarters. There is Green and Healthy Homes Initiative Coalition, and the Syracuse-led coalition through Uplift Syracuse that does a lot of work in pulling people together to talk about lead in a broader perspective and look at all of the other things that we can do so that we are all pushing forward in the same direction. So how are we doing? Are we making any difference? You know, over the years, the number of children with identified elevated lead test results has slowly declined. Onondaga County and the city of Syracuse is about on par with the national and state statistics, where you can see a decrease in the number of children overall in our community who have elevated test results. We still have a lot of work to do. In some of the most harder hit areas of our community are the same areas that we've seen consistently over the past few years. If you look at the maps, you'll see one map from 2013 on your left and the other is from 2018 on the right. Those two maps show consistently colored areas of the city that are known to have a higher percentage of rental properties, a lot of older homes in poor repair. They're more likely to be associated with issues of poverty and other markers of socioeconomic disadvantage for our community. But what you will see is that the map on the right, the colors are a little bit lighter. So that is an indication to us that things are slowly improving, and that means that the number of children with the levels at the highest end of the lead testing result reported is slowly decreasing. That's hopeful to us, and that is because of the work of all of our partners in moving everyone in the same direction. So, you know, lead is a significant problem for our community. It does impact people living in poverty more than it does families who are living in newer housing and housing in better condition. And a lot of times we hear, what exactly are we doing in our community? You heard remarks earlier today about our partnerships and how we are all trying to collaborate and work together to improve communication between city and county government, our county departments and programs and services. We are actively sharing information about our lead inspections with city code enforcement so that they are fully aware of the activities that we are undertaking at the county end. And so code enforcement officers are more efficient in the field when they're going into the homes and looking at the same conditions that we see when we're in the home. Access to information is essential at helping us all move in the same direction, and forums like this are critical at helping everyone in our community understand that, you know, while it looks like on the surface there's not a whole lot going on, the little duck's legs are paddling pretty hard underneath. There's always a lot going on behind the scenes, and the conversations among and between our partners are ongoing and active. Expanded resources, we're always excited to hear when there's new grant money, because that means that more homes will be treated and more owners will be able to take advantage of the grant funding resources around our community to make homes safer for children. So people ask often, how do I protect my child? The video was really good at pointing out the specific strategies to use to make sure that your home is safe from lead hazards. Very simply, take your shoes off at the door. Make sure you're using wet cleaning methods. Make sure you're using a certified contractor or get trained yourself before you initiate work on a property built before 1978. Use a HEPA filtered vacuum if you're going to clean up any debris. And call and ask for help or for information from any one of the partners in the room today if you need more information. Thank you for your time. I'm pleased to introduce my friend and colleague Stephanie Pasquale, who will give you a little bit of information about what the city's doing.
Just joking. Thanks. Thank you so much, Deb. Thank you so much for having us here today. I'm really excited to talk with you a little bit about what we're up to. So I'm going to fly through some of these slides so we can get to the good stuff and hear from Greg. But in the city of Syracuse, we do have a lot of housing units. So there's about 69,000 housing units, of which 33,000 are rental occupied. We know, those of you who are property owners out there, particularly in some of our distressed census tracts, that there's still, a high rate of housing vacancy. And that can affect property values, which makes it difficult to keep up and to access financing for homes. But what we do know is that through a lot of research and a lot of collaboration, that most of the children that you saw in Deb's chart regarding those kids that have elevated blood lead levels are residing in not huge apartment buildings, but 1, 2, and 3 family buildings. So that's our area of focus, and that's what we'd like to talk a lot about today. While only 20% of the county's children live in the city of Syracuse, 87% of the kids that test high for lead-based paint live in the city. So this, while it's a problem throughout the county, it certainly is concentrated in the urban core. Just to show you, some further data around where this is happening, these maps depict where we know children under the age of 6 with elevated blood lead levels reside, but they're also in the same census tracts where we have high rates of poverty and high rates of housing vacancy. So what is the city doing about it? We've been working really hard with our partners at the county and with home headquarters and others to develop a comprehensive approach, right? To emphasize compliance, to do some proactive enforcement, and to really get the communication, get the information, get the resources out there so that we can help you all get this work done. So how do we do that? We're trying to do more proactive outreach. We really are, when code enforcement calls come in now, we don't just automatically dispatch an inspector. We actually call the landlord first and say, hey, we got a complaint over here, did you know? And this is what's going on. So that's been a really successful program where we get compliance without issuing violations in a really high number of cases. We really tried to improve our internal processes to get more efficient. I want to let you all know, if you give us your email address, if there is a code violation or a complaint that comes in, our system can automatically email you that came in. So it's really good to keep us informed with cell phones and email addresses. External transparency, you can go to the City Line web portal and take a look at any properties. If you're looking to buy one, you can see what its code enforcement history is, at least through 2011. But you can also see if there's any open violations or other cases. As Deb mentioned, we're working with the county to make sure that any lead violations are also visible through the portal. And through community engagement, we've been conducting about 70 kitchen table talks, really talking with folks on the ground, figuring out what their housing concerns and needs are, and how that impacts how we deliver services to them in a way that is heard, and how we can help our tenants play their part in understanding what's available to them and what they can do to keep their homes safe. So I'm just going to fly through this, but we're doing a lot of data sharing. We are doing case management for cases in which traditional enforcement hasn't worked super well. We've been seeking all kinds of funding, not just that you'll hear today about some federal dollars, but really trying to work with our lending partners and others on affordable financing to get this stuff done. And then there's a lot of grassroots advocacy happening, and I'm really grateful for those voices that get lifted up through those efforts. We've reorganized our code enforcement, so we're working really hard to have inspectors really get to know their piece of the earth, and that each inspector will have a much smaller geography that they work on, so they can really get to know landlords and tenants and advocates in those neighborhoods. We have a focus on health and safety measures. That's what we're looking for when we come inside the property for a rental registry inspection. It's for health and safety, not every little ding or every little hole in the wall. That's what there's brochures up on one of our tables out there that sort of outline what we're looking for, but it really is the health and safety inspection. And we're constantly trying to find additional resources to help if we do identify things that need to be done, or if you identify things you know you need to have done, how can we get you access to that financing? So we do have a rental registry. Every rental property that's 1 or 2 units is required to be registered in the city of Syracuse. 3 units and above gets a certificate of compliance, and that's New York State law. Happy to talk with anybody offline afterward about that process and how you get it going, but it's last July we passed, and interior inspections are part of that process. So we know that, again, we're really trying to identify problems before they happen. We do have an administrative ticketing bureau now, the Bureau of Administrative Adjudication. As I mentioned, we really try to work with people first. You have to just ignore us, not call, not communicate, not have any progress at all to get to ticketing. But it is another measure that we have tool in our toolkit. We've identified priority properties that are in those census tracts where we know have the highest rates of lead poisoning, and we have been working on a lead ordinance that would help us identify lead hazards when we do inspections in homes. And now I'd like to call up one of our landlords we've been working with for a very long time. Well, not that long, right? Are you going to introduce Greg? Okay, sorry.
Give it one more time for Stephanie Pasquale, everybody. She's absolutely amazing, so many hats she wears. Thanks all of you for all that information. So up next we have Greg Smith. He's been really great. He's worked with us. We hold monthly meetings if you guys are interested to get in touch. The Syracuse Lead Prevention Coalition, just a group of us that meet up and talk about where we currently are in fighting the issue, and what resources are available, and what best practices are, and Greg's been great with that. He has written several nationally published articles about best practices for landlords. He has 40 years of experience in owning properties, renovating properties in some of the most challenged districts in the city that are dealing with lead. So he's firsthand dealt with the problem effectively and been a great partner. And he has a bachelor's degree in biology and science. And I'm a big fan. Greg Smith, you want to come say a few words for us?
A landlord with a degree in biology. I found in this business, every now and then you need to kill something. Anyway, what I'd like to do today is first dispel some of the myths about lead. Go through the 4 major vectors, where they are, why they are vectors, and what we can do to treat them. I'll briefly touch on HEPA-Vax, and then go into a kind of a random shopping list of tips for landlords. Now, the first one that I've been debating with people for many, let's get this the slides on track here. Okay, we can, yeah, we can hold it there. Yeah.
Let me know.
Okay, the myth, and granted, there's some truth to all myths, but that kids eat paint chips because they taste sweet. Having painted hundreds of houses, I've had lots of paint chips fly into my mouth, and they do not taste like candy. They're hard, they're sharp, they taste like dirt. I don't know where that came from. The reason that I like to debunk myths is because they distract us from finding the true vectors. And by the vectors, go back to high school, geometry. There's got to be a pathway between the lead and the bloodstream. And in the field of the landlords, we're trying to break it down at the very beginning. There's a meeting in a couple of days of people and service providers, and they're trying to break it down at the very end. The fact of the matter is that pica is a true thing, is a thing, and for kids under 18 months, it's probably considered normal. As far as chips and peels, they're pretty solid. It's kind of the equivalent of non-friable asbestos. They're not going to, it's safe and easy to pick them up or sweep them up. Dust is the main culprit because, in fact, actually, where was the dust slide? Yes. I have that sample in my pocket. I was going to pass it around, but they wouldn't let me because people might have wanted to see if it was sweet. But anyway, I didn't put that in a mortar or a pestle or anything. That was, I'll tell you where later, but that is paint that came right off the side of a house. It's not a chip, it's not a peel. That is truly something that you can imagine if you put your fingers on it, they would stick to it. And that is, that hand-to-mouth activity is where we get this from. I have a little demo that I give people explaining this. Just generally your hands, you always think their hands are clean, but if you take a white piece of paper and rub your finger on it, you'll see a smudge. Well, everybody's watched CSI, and they know that there's a material in that smudge, and you could technically weigh it. Well, if you want to save $100 and you think I'm going to put a penny in the bank, it'll take forever. Not if you put a penny in the bank every minute. And that's where, picking stuff up off the surface and putting it in your mouth, you accumulate that and you get to that amount that's only half a paper clip, and you're overexposed with lead. So it's much easier to do than you think. The new myth, and probably going to get a little pushback on this, is friction surfaces. That friction surfaces are perceived to be these little machines that are, distributed all around apartments that are grinding up little, microscopic particles of lead. And yes, there is some truth to that because, if you see a door that's ready to come off the hinges and there's a part of it that's worn through the paint and bare to the wood, yeah, that paint wore off and went somewhere. But that's a pretty minor thing when you compare to the amount in that, go back to that bag, to the amount in that I got with about 3 passes of a scraper. It's all resulted from ultraviolet exposure to linseed oil-based paints. Now, we talk a lot about 1978. Think 1878. Painters used to make their own paint up. They take linseed oil, they mix up a pigment that had lead in it because it was a good material, and that stuff has been sitting out there in the sun, and it crumbles to dust. Can I get some reverb here? Crumbles into dust. Okay. Literally. It sounds like a monster movie, but we're expecting that there's some agent or machine or something, but dust happens. Is that the same? Dust happens. Okay. So that's what I'm basically trying to do here is and where does it happen? When you run across dust, the thing is you got to up your game because chips and peels, like I said, they're easy to get. They're huge. You can see them. Once you run into dust, Your containment's got to be a lot better. Your cleanup has got to be a lot better. Where do we find it? Windows, I'll get into that later. Any surface that has long been exposed to sunlight. You know, I mean, and it doesn't necessarily, particularly, in fact, I just found a place on one of my houses the other day. It was a little area in a basement window well that had been skipped, and there was paint crumbling there. You will find it even underneath intact paint. So if you've got that came off a house that was built around 1850 or 1860 and didn't look too bad, and we got some good paint off, and that was just barely clinging on underneath. So why I bring up this thing about the mist is I want to change the nomenclature. To drop this thing about peeling and shipping paint, what we need to be concerned about is peeling and crumbling paint. Now, going on to the major vectors, windows, I mentioned, and you know, there's the storm windows made the perfect storm because, you know, they used to have wooden storm windows that they'd put on and take off, and, you know, in the summertime they'd be off and people would paint the outside of the wood sashes. Once the storm windows went up, nobody painted the wood sashes anymore. So you've got wood sashes that have paint that has been exposed to sunlight for 70 years. You know, and you know, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. That crumbles. I talked to it, and this is a true story from Syracuse. One of the county people told me that doing a risk assessment is very much a forensic activity. And there was one kid that had a kind of persistent high lead level, and they couldn't figure out. And they talked to me. They said, "Well, what do you like to eat? And where do you eat?" He said, "Oh, my favorite snack, I like raisins. Here, let me show you my." And he went up in his bedroom and lifted the window up, and of course the sill is just lined with crumbling lead dust, and he had raisins lined up there, you know, like a little hoard, and that's, you know, that's kind of like the worst example of a window poisoning. But you get that UV breakdown. You do get some friction. Most of the window rubbing surface is not painted, but you do get some friction, and also you get the issue of condensation on single pane windows. The water runs down, makes the paint peel off. So the treatment is, in fact, yep, there's the window. If we go back to that checklist, yeah, you know, anybody that's been in this business that's, you know, in an effective fashion has a checklist of what they do on every turnover, so you can get a standard product. And this is our checklist, which is conveniently done for people who, you know, I had one guy who couldn't read English and one guy who couldn't read anything, and so we made this up so we could get our product consistent. And number 17 there, you'll see the guy, you know, cleaning out the window tracks. Every apartment, every turnover, every time somebody moves in or out, somebody goes around, lifts all the windows up and checks the tracks. And if they need to be gone over with a HEPA vac and you know, touch up the paint, that's your minimum. Replacing the windows, yeah, better idea yet. Also the window stool, which everybody calls the window sill. The window sill is that inside part. The stool is the trim that's you know, down at the bottom of the casings. They call that a gnawing area because it's, you know, oftentimes right around the, oh, here, can I demonstrate? You know, like for little toddlers, they'll crawl up to that and chew on it. And also, people leave the windows open, that section gets weathered. So even if you're not into stripping woodwork, that's a section that behooves you to just strip the paint right off of it and essentially abate that one small area that can be a key vector. Porches, well, doors I wanted to get into next, because they're a possible friction surface. One part of it on our checklist there, you know, you'll see the hinges. Go around and make sure every door works right. If they're rubbing, you know, you got a problem with the hinges. If you need to take it off site and run a plane over it or something like that, but a properly operating door, sometimes when they get really built up with paint, you can just remove the stops, and you can, they're not an effective architectural detail. That's worth stripping, and you can get the original looking replacements and just replace them so that they're not banging against each other. And the main thing is maintain the paint surface. Porches are a major vector. Okay, thank you. Because porches defy being painted. They always have. The paint wears out in the traffic areas days after it's put down. And as a result, they've been painting porches, and you get thick buildup around the perimeters, which is not the traffic area, and that is old and gets crumbly. The foot friction is a factor. Paint gets down into the cracks, and also porches are a place that kids play and hang out. Our way of dealing with this, and everybody gets a different way, something that works for them. If you're more carpentry oriented, you might just take the deck boards up and put down a composite material that doesn't need painting. But what we do is, since we try to repair everything, indoor-outdoor carpeting. We'll wrap the deck with WR Grace, a waterproof membrane, and put carpet down. And it never needs to be painted. It's fun to play on. One caution is if you're doing any work, the carpet can be a reservoir for dust. So if you're doing any work, you need to HEPA vac the heck out of it. The last major vector is floors. Floors, are because the dust always settles on the floor, and if it's crawl around on the floor, this is essentially a housekeeping issue. It seems to be addressed a little bit differently, perhaps in the lead law, but I won't get into that right now. But we can enhance housekeeping. We were talking about damp cleaning everything. We don't recommend damp cleaning wall-to-wall carpeting, and that's why in rental apartments don't use wall-to-wall carpeting. You can't damp clean it for a number of other reasons. A glossy, non-porous surface gets to that. Go up to the vac. That picture of the vacuum. Oh yeah, right there. This is my HEPA vac, and I figured it out. This machine has sucked up and removed 1 ton of contaminated material from the near west side. That one machine. When you look at the EPA specs on the RRP stuff, they're kind of upside down. They say, oh, you should wet everything. Yeah, wetting stuff, keeps it from, fluffing up and getting dusty in the air. And then they'll say, oh, never use power, sanders unless you have a HEPA vac. I want to turn this around. Use the HEPA vac. Get the attachments for your power sanders. Once you wet stuff, you get this wet, toxic slurry that's really difficult to clean up and runs into cracks, and then you've got a wet surface that you can't paint right away anyway. So first thing, think HEPA vacs. You've got to have one of these. A good industrial quality model, and that is probably had that for 30 years, is about $500. But hey, it's essential for this business to have one of those. I want to take a little break here for a minute and do a survey. How many people think, now stripping paint is a, kind of hazardous, very tedious, labor-intensive process. How many people think that someday we will have robots that can strip paint? Joe's counting? Yeah. Everybody? Okay, everybody. Now, replacing windows is a very skill-oriented, custom thing. Does anybody think we're going to have robots that'll do that? Oh, he's not counting. Nobody. Okay. So I want to know, this problem has been around for a long time. In spite of our clamoring for a quick fix, it's going to be around for a long time. I want to establish our place in history of this situation. What we need to do is, one, maintain an intact paint film everywhere. Because if we just maintain the intact paint film, the robots are on their way to help us completely abate these things. For the next generation, we maintain an intact paint film. We don't rent an apartment with a hole in the wall bigger than a thumbtack hole. And replace all those painted wood sash windows as fast as we can. That is our mission as I see it in the history of this. Now, I'd like to get on, probably running out of time, with tips. And the essence is that you integrate lead safety, into your maintenance program. I mean, it starts with the RRP stuff, just not making an active mess, doing things right. We have the checklist there. When you're doing a vacant apartment preparation, we do that screening. If we're going to be doing any window remodeling or window replacement or stripping or anything like that, do it during vacants, because one, you don't have any relocation issues. Your containment is not such a big deal, and your cleanup just kind of morphs into the normal housekeeping cleanup that you're doing for the next tenant anyway. So, check your windows, check your doors, touch up and repaint as necessary. Exteriors. Now, I was painting a house once, and a legendary circus inspector, Sean Casey, stopped, just to chat, I guess, and he saw, we had everything draped, and he said, "Oh, doing a lead job, huh?" And I said, "No, we're just painting the house." And he said, every paint job is a lead job, isn't it? And that's the fact of the matter, is every time I saw somebody the other day, and, I'm kicking myself because, I'm the kind of guy that'll pull over and yell at people for scraping into the dirt, I mean, it's kind of my mission, They were just scraping the house, everything going right down into the dirt. Gotta collect your chips. When we paint a house, we end up with a full garbage can full of paint chips. Every chip is collected and taken out to the landfill. One of my tips is, before you start painting a house, get your trimmer out and trim the vegetation around the perimeter and rake it out real clean, because that will make your cleanup much easier later. Another tip, quality paint is the best value. Do you know how to tell good paint from crappy paint? Does anybody know? It costs more, okay? Paint is one of those things, you get what you pay for. If water's cheap, and if the paint's cheap, that's what's in the can. I met a guy at a class reunion once when, this was way back in the top of the line. We pay $50 a gallon for paint now. At the time I was paying 20, and that was top of the line paint. And he said to me, paint is worth $200 a gallon, installed. Because that's the point. Paint is all about the labor. So it's the wrong place to try to save money, especially when you're getting into this our mission here is trying to maintain the intact paint layer. Now, here's another thing you can do. We standardize all our colors, because I heard somebody talking once about, in some city, they require every apartment to be completely repainted between every tenant. It's like, hey, the rooms are going to start getting smaller. We touch up everything, clean everything, touch up. If you're using quality paint, trim is one big thing that gets cited any place there's a little chip. We've got some trim, and granted, we just slaved over it way back when, but you can get 20 or 30 years out of a trim paint job just touching it up if your paint's quality and your work is quality. We were talking about the porch carpets before. If you're buying into that, and believe me, it's safer, you never have to paint it. Use something that's UV stabilized, it's olefin, otherwise your carpeting will crumble to dust too. Put the underlayment, and we also put runners on the wear areas so that they can be replaced in between. The last thing I want to mention is, there's a term called component rehab, which is basically kind of taking a project on. And you think, everybody's out there thinking, oh, he said that, my mission in my life is to replace all the windows, and you're all cranking through your mind. I've got 10 apartments, and there's 5 windows, that's 50 windows, that's, oh my God, how many thousands of dollars worth of windows is, but one way is to kind of make the cost a little more palatable is to break it down and not think you're gonna have to go out and do it tomorrow. If you have a broken window, instead of spending 30 or 40 bucks for that piece of glass and running around, replace the window. And when you replace windows, get custom-made windows. Don't go to the big box store and get what's on the shelf and make it fit. You know, I get windows at Erie Materials. They're about $190, and you know, three-day turnaround. Sounds like I'm advertising for them, but anyway, any supplier will have a company that can give you a you know, good quality custom-made window that you just fit in without having to do a lot of work. When you do your windows, throw a drop cloth outside. I know changing windows seems like an inside job, but you always get a little bit spread out. You know, put that out there so you can collect it when you're done. Now, you know, if you're remodeling one room in a place, do the window. If you're remodeling one apartment in a house, do the windows. You know, if you're also if you ever have to pull down some trim, I like to, you know, I'm kind of an old house guy. You know, we like to restore the you know, antique woodwork. If you're pulling a piece of trim down, strip it before you put it on, because when you put it on a sawhorse and you can take it off site, it's like 1/10 of the work, you know, and the stress in your joints as it is doing it in place on a vertical surface. So we strip that. You know, my final comments are directed to the landlords in the group. You know, hundreds of people have been to thousands of meetings about this, and they have achieved a consensus about one thing: that we are the ones that are going to fix this problem. And people who don't know what HEPA stands for, you know, will debate for ages the material and the diameter and the length of the stick that they're going to hit us with. You know, we own the problem both figuratively and literally, and we have chosen as our careers keeping the people warm, safe, and dry. So, you know, this is our duty. This is an honor. We are the 300 Spartans that are standing between our children and an insidious foe. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, everyone. Give it one more time for Greg Smith. All right, so at this part of the program, we want to thank County Executive Ryan McMahon for coming, Deputy Mayor Sharon Owens. Thank you so much for your words and your leadership on this issue. Appreciate it. And right now, we'd like to call up our panel. So the next, for those of you who are with us, we're going to have a panel discussion here about some of the more frequently asked questions. Try to educate people as much as we can, and then we're going to open it up to the group, to the floor, to have people ask questions. Anybody in the room who has questions about lead, we've got an amazing panel of experts here, some of the people who are dealing with this firsthand, and they'll be able to field all your questions for you. Great. So on our panel today, we have Sally Santangelo, Executive Director of CNY Fair Housing, Wendy Kurlitz with the Onondaga County Health Department, Greg Smith there, that you've already met, Katie Bronson with GHHI, Green Healthy Homes, Marty Scan with the county as well. What else we got? Oh, DA William Fitzpatrick, how could I forget? And Vicki Payne with the EPA. So we've got a great panel of experts here. We're going to go through some of the most frequently asked questions, some of the most important things that we feel folks in the housing world need to be made aware of, and conversations we need to be having. So our first question would be to Sally Santangelo. Sally, from your perspective, what are the rules and responsibilities that a landlord has when it comes to this issue in housing in general?
Thank you, Councilor. I have a couple slides to kind of highlight some of the issues and concerns we see related to landlords' responsibilities. First is that, of course, that landlords when renting a property built prior to 1978, so of course most of the housing in the city of Syracuse, a landlord has to provide a pamphlet on identifying and controlling lead hazards. Also has to notify tenants of any known information about lead hazards that exist in the property or lead-based paint that exists in the property. And include language about, in the lease or in the contract, that includes a lead warning statement. We talk to a lot of tenants at our agency at CNY Fair Housing, and we often ask tenants if they have ever received a lead pamphlet when they've rented a property, and there are a lot of tenants who notify us, who tell us, not just in Syracuse, but we serve 9 counties, so throughout the area we serve, that they've never seen a lead brochure or pamphlet when renting properties. Housing providers also cannot refuse to rent to families with children. So that includes any properties that contain lead-based paint. Families with children under the age of 18 are protected under both federal and state fair housing laws. And so a housing provider, so it is illegal to refuse to rent to families with children because of a fear that a child will get lead poisoning. And such refusal, again, as I said, would be a violation of both federal and state fair housing laws. We do hear again from individuals who have been denied housing or being told that the housing provider will not rent to them because they have family or children under the age of 6. We also, in New York State now, it is illegal to refuse to rent to individuals because of what's called their source of income, meaning if an individual receives a voucher, a housing choice voucher, a Section 8 voucher, or public assistance, a housing provider cannot refuse to rent to those individuals. So there's an additional level of compliance required in terms of renting to individuals with a voucher that would then lead to an inspection. Landlords can affirmatively market lead-free units. So if you have lead-free units, you can affirmatively market those to families with children. And if you have some units where the lead is remediated, you can give families preference for those units, as opposed to units in which the lead is not remediated. However, though, if you don't have lead-free units available, you have to allow, families must be allowed to rent another unit. And if you are, as a landlord, you do find you end up with children, a family with children who ends up being lead poisoned, it is illegal to force the family to move. However, you can allow a family to end their lease early or to transfer to another unit that does not contain lead hazards. It may be something that ends up being requested as a reasonable accommodation to vacate the lease, depending on the situation. And this was mentioned in the videos as well, the importance of, if there are repairs being made, of protecting the rights of tenants when they are in those properties, when repairs are being made. If renovations, repainting, or repairs are being done in a property that contains lead, giving those tenants advance notice, making sure they have the opportunity to vacate the unit. You have to document that the tenants have been notified. And it's always a good idea to have them sign a pre-renovation form so that it protects you as well, that you have documentation that they have been notified. Of course, contractors have to be certified to use lead-safe work practices, which I think we'll hear more about. And then the tenant should plan to keep children out of the house anytime that lead anytime painted surfaces are being worked on in those properties.
Great, thank you, Sally. I forgot to introduce one of our panelists, Stephanie Pasquale. So as I said, Stephanie is at the front line of all these issues, doing so many great things. So the next question for you, Stephanie, is what do code inspectors look for when they're going into a property, and what can landlords do to prepare for an inspection or before renting the property? What are best practices for landlords, and what are the code inspectors looking for?
Thanks, Joe. So as we mentioned a little bit earlier, for rental registry inspections, for those recertifications or initial licensing for the for the rental properties. We're really looking for health and safety items, and this I know it's hard to read this slide, but these brochures are available right outside. But very basic items that they're looking for around heat, around, you know, the provision, as Greg mentioned, you know, that it's dry, safe, and warm. These are the items that the inspectors are looking for. I thought it was a great question to ask for, you know, how do you best prepare? Well, the best way to prepare is to make sure you know, if there's an appointment, that the tenants are aware, that they know someone's coming through and why. If we do get called on a complete inspection, while the main focus of the inspector is certainly to look for the item that is of complaint, there's this checklist is sort of on their shoulders as well, particularly visually looking for that chipping, peeling paint. That's you know, very important, particularly in units where we know that there's young children. So this is our sort of our big checklist that we're looking through. And again, it's not. I want to just emphasize that code enforcement sometimes can seem like the big scary beast coming into the property. We really do want to work with landlords. We know it's a partnership. We know we need you. And we know that sometimes, you know, contractors don't come when they say, or, you know, that if it's an exterior issue and it's cold outside, we really will try to work with you, but you got to work with us too. So that's the message I'd love to leave with you guys today.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. So next, Wendy Kurlowitz with the Onondaga County Health Department. So as a landlord, what would I do if my property is cited for lead? What happens next? What is the process, and how does that work?
Okay, hello, good afternoon. Any home that's inspected by the Onondaga County Health Department Division of Environmental Health, our inspectors, if they go out and lead paint hazards are found during that inspection, they're sent a notice in demand. In this notice in demand letter, it includes the components that were tested. During the testing process, we are looking at components on a property which can include porch decks, windowsills and tracks, door frames, anything that's chipping, peeling, chalking, deteriorating. Those areas are tested. So the notice in demand will include those areas. It will also include dates for compliance. So there's standard time frame post-inspection when work must be completed on the property, and this is included. Along with the dates for compliance is information about contacting our inspectors. Our phone number and our web address is on there. I can't stress how important it is to contact the inspectors just to, you know, what do we need to know to help with compliance? Those inspectors can help you review components and discuss the specific hazards that were found at the property, along with remediation efforts. Sometimes that list that we provide on those components can be confusing. There could be areas that Greg was saying, we're not talking about replacing full components, it's paint stabilization to make sure that that dust hazard and the paint chipping hazard is not going to be there in the future for exposure risk. Attend a renovate, repair, and painting class. Let's learn about your lead safe work practices. We have information available after this forum for local resources for training. Research some local funding. Let's see if there's any qualifications that you may meet for permanent renovation options at your property. And we've stressed this a few times as well. Schedule a timeline for those tenants to be away from the house. The lead safe work practices is not only protecting the families, but it's protecting the workers. And we want to give the residents an opportunity to know when you're coming, they cannot be home, and they can come back when the work is safely been cleaned up and they can re-enter the home. And continue the conversation with the OCHD inspectors. Let us know what the progress is. What are the limitations? What are your concerns about compliance going forward at the property? If during the time frame that we've issued this notice in demand that the compliance date comes and goes and work has not been completed on the property, the next step in our enforcement process is to schedule an administrative hearing. This hearing is an opportunity for a respondent to come, a hearing officer, and environmental health staff to discuss the barriers and what is getting in the way of fixing the hazards at the property. As a result of the administrative hearing, a report is created, and that is the resulting Effective that is a hearing order which is signed by the Commissioner of Health. That hearing order is attached to the property deed over at the county clerk's office. And along with that hearing order, there can be referrals made. We can refer to the City of Syracuse Division of Code Enforcement to let them know that there's open lead paint violations that are still at that property. We can have a referral for the Department of Social Services and Economic Security to withhold rental assistance. That hearing order will possibly give an extension of time where work still can be completed, and there may be fines that are attached to that hearing order. If that second date goes by, there will be the possibility of adding an additional administrative hearing where there's more penalties and fines that can be assessed at this property. In the event that all the work is done, all fines and penalties have been paid, there will be a correction notice issued. This correction notice will go out to the owner and will also go to the county clerk's office to review any hearing order that may be attached to the deed.
Thank you, Wendy, appreciate it.
You know.
So this is kind of what they call in journalism hiding the lead. For those of you who work in housing, this is probably the number one question that I get. What resources are available for making repairs, and what assistance can people working in the housing market get to help deal with their properties? So for this question, we will turn to three of our people who are on the front lines. Katie Bronson again, the Director of Community Housing Initiatives with home headquarters, Marty Skane, the Director of Community Development, and again from Stephanie Pasquale with the City of Syracuse. So I would ask the three of you, what assistance is available, what resources are available out there?
At home headquarters, is this on?
Yeah, just pull it a little closer.
At home headquarters, we have a number of programs, both for homeowners and for landlords. So I'm just going to focus on the landlords today, since that is our focus for the forum. One of the programs we do have available is called our Investor Program. That Investor Program is for home improvement, both purchase and rehab. Now that is private funding, so it's not a grant, it's not a deferred loan, it is just a pure loan. But it does give flexibility of what type of work you do, and you can also use it for purchase as well. So it's both purchase and rehab. I have information on our table of all these programs later, so stop by if you have any questions. The second program we have available is more focused towards lead. It's called our Syracuse Landlord Program. And that program is to address lead hazards that are identified through a lead risk assessment and code violations. So this is funding from HUD, so we do have to do a lead risk assessment and address all of those hazards. And it's a 50-50 program, 50% payback loan and 50% deferred loan. And again, I can give you more details at the table afterwards. Another program we have is a Windows and Doors program. As it's been discussed, Windows and Doors is where you see a lot of friction surfaces. So we have focus funding in Census Tract 23, 54, and 58. Where we see children with elevated blood lead levels to address exterior windows and doors. So again, if you need more information about that, I have applications up there. The last program I do want to talk about is also our RP training, that 8-hour training. We actually just received some funding from home builders to provide training to people who have attended this forum. So if you do not have the RRP training, again, come to our table, and I have a one-page application you'll just need to fill out, so we're starting to accept applications today. But again, one thing I always suggest people to do is to look at Home Headquarters website, sign up to our listserv, and to give us a call, because we always have different programs and resources available to not just the City of Syracuse, but throughout the 5-county region. And what we really want to do is find a program that works for you and your property.
I got the controller over here, no problem. So, Marty's going to talk a little bit about the County's Lead program, but together we've been working on accessing as many resources as possible to bring lead and healthy homes remediation dollars to this community. So as mentioned earlier, the city of Syracuse was successful in partnership with the county to secure $4.1 million, of which 3.5 is, or 3.6, excuse me, is for lead remediation, and $400,000 for the Healthy Homes supplement. So there's different things we will be able to do. As Katie mentioned, we work very closely with home headquarters. We've funded some of the programs that she talked about. We really are constantly trying to develop programs that are flexible, creative, and hopefully address the needs as best as possible. Anytime you work with funding that has a government component, there's paperwork, and we know it's annoying, and we know how hard it is sometimes to get tenant stuff. Staff on both of our teams are very willing to work with you, very willing to work with tenants, and very willing to come up with clever ways to go get deeds and to help with all that paperwork that is required for the program. But once you do participate in the program, if you own multiple properties, we do want to remediate any and all properties, particularly in those targeted census tracts that Katie was mentioning. Marty?
Thank you. So yeah, I'm Marty Skane. I run community development for Onondaga County, and I'm going to start by telling you something that you don't usually hear from government officials. We have lots of money. So we have over $10 million between the grant money and the matching funds that we put in to get the grants. We have over $10 million to spend in the next 42 months. So help us spend it. The qualifying for the grant, the important thing to remember is qualifying for the grant is not based on the owner's income. It's based on the income of the occupant of the unit. So you need to live in the person needs to live in a home that contains lead paint hazards. There must be a child under the age of 6 who either lives in a home, but they also can just spend a significant amount of time in the home. They don't have to live there permanently. The annual gross household income no more than 80%. So for a family of 4 right now, that's around $63,000. So those are the qualifiers, and anybody who wants to find out more, we have a table out front, and you can contact us on our website is our address and our phone number and everything you need to know to get a hold of us and help us fix your units. Thank you.
Thank you, and just want to remind everyone again, Katie mentioned the RRP training. They're giving away 10, correct? 10 free RRP trainings for those working the housing. If anyone would like that training program, it's available for free. If you go to the home headquarters table, there's 10 of them available. Our next question is for Bill Fitzpatrick, our county district attorney. I just want to thank him for making this a priority for his administration, for his group. D.A. Fitzpatrick, what are the potential criminal charges that landlords can face if they ignore in order to remediate the lead hazards, and what does it take to get to that point where your office gets involved?
Sure. Thank you, Joe. Thank you for your leadership on this issue. I just want to correct Greg when he was talking about the myths in Katie's movies. The only myth I saw was the guy sneaking out with his tackle box and fishing rod while mom was sitting on the couch with this huge smile on her face with his 8-month-old. But trust me, if that was my house, I would be worried about lead, but it would be of the 9mm version. But the fact that you are here makes it extraordinarily unlikely that you will ever be at cross purposes with my office. Charging someone criminally in light of the fact that there are so many people here is obviously, in my case, Joe, is a last resort. I don't presume the guilt of anyone that we've charged up to this point. It was an infinitesimal fraction of the actual landlords in the city of Syracuse, and they will have their day in court. But I can tell you that the potential violations range from, and the key phrase there is willful violation of the public health law. The cases that we have charged, we have documented numerous instances where the city and county have reached out to these landlords in an effort. And the other element of that particular public health law is a willful refusal to comply. So again, you really have to work yourself into a situation where you come in conflict with my office. Other charges are potentially endangering the welfare of the child. If the child is, if you are a landlord and you're ignoring this problem and the child is continuing to eat lead paint and suffer some serious injury, that could be the generic endangering the welfare of a child, which is a misdemeanor. And obviously, if a child is seriously brain damaged or dies, then there could be more serious felony charges, up to and including homicide charges. Those would be obviously extremely rare, and nobody even wants to consider that as a possibility, I would hope. Potential consequences for the public health law violation, as the law stands right now, is punishable by up to a $10,000 fine. Endangering the welfare of a child is similar in that it carries a potential 1 year incarceration. Again, in the cases that we are handling up at this point, I'm not looking to lock anybody up. I'm looking people to get into compliance. And because they've taken it to this extreme, I certainly think that some type of serious fine is appropriate, and then devoting that fine money to both the city and the county and assisting in lead abatement. What factors do I look for, Joe, in whether or not I would charge somebody? I would look at the situation the tenants find themselves in. Has there been a serious injury to a child or to a tenant? Has there been repeated code violations, repeated efforts by the city and the county to remediate this problem and simply have those ignored? I am told that prior to us charging these individuals that it was a decision for them that was a financial one. I can ignore these and face no consequences, an erroneous thought as it turns out, or I can spend a lot of time, money, and effort in making my home that I'm renting out many times to immigrant guests to this community a safe place for the children to live, and sadly they've opted for the former to their detriment. It also considered the number of properties, the extensive involvement that the landlord has, and the length of time. I'm not suggesting that once somebody gets a letter from the city that 48 hours later I'll be there with my investigators throwing handcuffs on somebody. That's absurd, and it's certainly not consistent with the cases that we've handled up to this date. You see the amount of effort that's here. You see the commitment from Joe Driscoll, the county executive, and the mayor. Take advantage of it. You'll never have to come and be at cross purposes with my office.
Thank you very much, District Attorney. Appreciate it. So our last question is to Vicki Payne with the EPA, and I know a lot of us live in the political world, so we're used to acronyms, but that's the Environmental Protection Agency for those who aren't as well versed. What are the federal regulations pertaining to lead paint, and where can someone owning property go for more information?
Thank you very much, and thank you for asking me to be here today. I'm honored to be on this panel, and I want to also congratulate you for your amazing amount of grant money. That's very, very good news.
Yes.
So I'm going to talk a little bit, very briefly, about a law that's taken me years and years. I'm still learning about it, so I'm going to try to cover as much as I can. The lead-based paint regulations on a federal level are basically three parts. There's the RRP rule, and that covers renovations in target housing, that's housing built before 1978, and you have to disturb greater than 6 square feet, and that's per room, so it's not additive. It's not 1 square foot plus 1 square foot in the different rooms. It's 6 square feet in each room, or 20 square foot exterior space. That's the de minimis. It has to be done for compensation, and the agency does, the agency's position on this is that landlords who are doing their own work are regulated, because you are getting rent for those properties. Those properties are investment properties, and so they are, any work you do on them would be done for compensation, and you would be, your work would be regulated. The RP rule does not regulate the presence of lead paint or the condition of lead paint. So it's once the paint is disturbed, that's when the RP rule comes into effect. Testing is not a requirement. I can't see where. Yes. Testing is not a requirement of our regulations. There's this presumption of lead if the house is built before 1978. If you want to exclude your renovation activity from federal regulation, you would need to get it tested. And that would be done by a risk assessor or an inspector certified. A renovator can do the testing to exempt renovation, but every single component has to be done that's going to be affected. So if you're changing out a window, that's a lot of components. Another part is the disclosure rule. That is applicable to landlords and sellers of property. Again, Target Housing is built before 1978. It applies to both sellers and leasers. It's not delegable to the states. So if a state has, or a local community has an ordinance that is very similar, the federal regulations also apply. The disclosure rule requires a number of things. I think most everybody in here is a landowner, so if you're doing a lease, it's going to require a lead warning statement on your lease. It's going to require the provision of the Protect Your Family brochure. It's going to require a lead disclosure form that you have to fill out and sign with your lessees to provide them with any known lead-based paint hazards or lead or any testing that's been done or any reports that have been done. So, for example, if you have had a tenant with an elevated lead level and the health department has come in and done an assessment and they've done testing, that is provided to you, and you need to provide that to any future lessees, and it needs to be part of that lease package. So any kind of reports or testing that you do have done needs to become part of that lease. So, and then the third part is the abatement rule, which I'm going to talk about a little bit today in comparison with the RRP rule. Okay. They have similar requirements. Both of them require firm certification, which is basically a registration. You go online and you register your firm or your company name, your LLC, whatever it is. You pay a fee, and it's good for 3 years in the abatement world and 5 years in the renovation world. Individual training and certification requirements also apply. So there's the renovation world where you have a certified renovator. That's the training that was mentioned earlier, the 8-hour training. It has to be provided by an EPA accredited trainer. And at the end you get, at the end of the course you take a test. If you pass the test, you get a certificate with your picture on it, and that green football, or the green football's a firm cert. The other one would come from the trainer for your individual training. Both rules require occupant protection in some manner. In the renovation world, you have to contain your site. You have to put plastic down. You have to keep your area clean. You have to, not transport your tools through the hallways without cleaning them off. No open dumpsters, that sort of thing. You want to minimize as much as possible the dust that's created with the work that you're doing. In the abatement world, the supervisor assigned to the job has to provide an occupant protection plan. It can also be developed by a project designer. We don't see too many of those, but supervisors are also trained in the development of occupant protection plans. Let's say work practices, they also, both rules, the abatement rule and the renovation, repair, and painting rule require, let's say, work practices. In the abatement world, it references the HUD guidelines. So that's a humongous document. It's like 3 pages thick, and there's a lot more training involved for the abatement world. And they both require clearance after the work is done. I think I missed this slide. Okay, wait a minute. I'm sorry about this, I missed a slide.
That's all right.
Okay. So in New York, both the RRP rule and the abatement rule are implemented by EPA, implemented and enforced by EPA. The state has not applied for delegation authority for either one of these. So if you do have similar requirements at the state and local level, Please be aware that the federal rule also still applies. I wanted to talk a little bit about the term remediation. It's used a lot at the local level. It is not an EPA term. So we have abatements and we have renovations. A lot of times when the health department requires a landlord or property owner to remediate lead paint, people think that means abatement. And it can mean abatement. It just really depends. You have to pay attention to what it means for our rule to be in effect. If you're abating, you're eliminating the hazard. If you're using interim controls to stabilize the paint and you disturb paint greater than that de minimis I talked about before, that 6 square feet, then that's considered a renovation. So it is regulated under the RRP rule, even though you may be thinking you're doing an abatement. So you would have to hire or be an RRP certified firm and have renovator training to do that work. Whereas in the abatement world, if you're doing an abatement and you're completely eliminating the lead hazard, then you would have abatement training. And there's 5 different disciplines in the abatement world, and everybody working on an abatement site has to be trained. All the workers have to go to the worker training and receive their certificate. There has to be a supervisor assigned to the site, and there has to be clearance testing. For RRP, there's only the renovator or dust sampling technician. And there's only one needs to be assigned to each site. So if you have if you're a certified renovator, you've taken that training, you have that certificate, you just need to provide any on-the-job specific training to whoever you have working on that site and document it and keep those records. Not everybody has to have that certificate that works on the site, but you do have to assign a certified renovator. So it's really important to remember that you need both the firm certification and the individual certification, because the firm certification involves no training. And then lastly, I skip ahead to this is our website, which is epa.gov/lead. There's a lot of information here. So if you're a certified, or if you're a firm or a landlord wanting to do RRP work, these areas that are circled in red are where you might want to go to become a certified firm. There's a link at the top. And then the bigger square is the Renovate Right and basic information on renovation. And then down at the bottom on the other side is abatement information with information on the abatement and risk evaluation programs. For disclosure, in the middle, that is under the column Protect Your Family, and there's resources there for disclosure. And up at the top is for property managers to know your responsibilities. And then down at the bottom, I just included this because this is report a violation. There's a shield at the bottom of the page. So if you click on that shield, it'll take you to a form you fill out for if you want to report a violation. There's a lot more information on there too. Also, one thing I didn't put in my slides, but I wanted to point out was in the disclosure world, as a landlord, you need to provide the Protect Your Family brochure. It's a blue brochure. In the renovation world, you need to provide the Renovate Right pamphlet. It's kind of a salmony pink color. And I think that we have a table out front that has copies of both of those for information. So this is just where you can call to get additional information. We have a main line that's answered by several people there in the middle if you have additional questions. Also, there's the National Lead Information Center and our website. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Becky, we appreciate it. And once again, for those of you that are interested, there's RRP training being available up at the home headquarters table. 10 different property owners can get free training, free certification there. And we encourage you, after this is all over, to please go check out the resource tables. There's a lot of information out there. But at this point in the program, when we have all these experts in the room, and we appreciate all of you coming out here and exploring this issue with us. We're going to take questions from the audience. Rich, if you want to grab the mic. And if anyone has any questions for any of the experts here, please just raise your hand and we'll try our best to answer them in a timely and effective manner. Any questions up there? Rich is going to get a certain workout tonight. No need to go to the gym.
Hi, first of all, I want to thank everyone. I really appreciate all the work being done and the collaboration and the education. I do have some questions, but Vicki in particular, the difference between the RRP versus the abatement. You talked about when the RRP rule applies. Can you speak a little bit more about when the abatement rule would apply?
So it's kind of a semantic. It all depends on the intent. If you're doing something to your property to renovate it, it's a renovation. If you're doing something specifically with the intent to eliminate the lead paint hazard, that's an abatement. And the only time they sort of overlap is if you're not really removing the hazard, you're just patching it up, you're stabilizing it, you might be sanding a little piece of a banister and painting over it. But most of it is left there. That would be considered an interim control, and that is considered a renovation under the EPA regulations.
Okay, I ran into a situation where, is there a dollar amount ever considered?
No.
It doesn't involve how much work is being done? Okay.
Well, only in that the amount of square footage. And there's so many, little caveats to this whole, because a window replacement or any kind of individual demolition activity, that's regulated regardless of how much you're doing. So if you're doing this little teeny window, it's still regulated. And it's also regulated as an interior and an exterior renovation. So you have to do, let's say, work practices for both.
Okay, so I've been trying to do for me, it's a good sized renovation, but in other people's worlds, it might not be so large. But I was told that because of the size of it, it would have to be considered, I would have to use an abatement contractor.
Well, all right, if the health department is requiring you to abate for lead, that's a completely different story.
So another question, and then I'll stop. I've been to the EPA website to look up firms. There's pages where you can find certified firms to do work for you. Firms certified with the abatement level, there's over 100 RRP workers out there. There's 12 with the abatement certification, and they predominantly commercial. There are only 3 that would be willing to do residential type work. Can any of you speak to, has any consideration been given to contractors, the professionals who are going to be doing the work? If we want to be improving our properties, and there aren't a lot of people out there certified to safely be doing this, has any focus or any research been done on how to get more professionals to get this certification to be doing some of this repair work?
Sure, please, my colleagues, please chime in. So, the City of Syracuse, in partnership, we've been holding lots of info sessions and providing scholarships, and I know Home Headquarters has funded some scholarships to get more firms certified, not just trained, but actually get through that certification process, particularly minority and women business enterprise firms. So there's a huge push, as Marty mentioned, we can say with pride and with excitement. We have lots of money. This is a good time to get those certifications and maintain those certifications. So we're certainly trying our best to get more people to understand why it's a great idea to do and to build on that list. And I don't know if Katie or Marty wants to chime in on that.
I would like to add one thing, and that is that our database, which is the search engine you're speaking to, has, let's just say it was designed by the low bidder. So there are some there have been some noted problems with it. Like sometimes if a firm has a combo cert, they have both, they'll only appear as the renovator in the search. So if you ever have a question about a firm, if they claim they're abatement certified, just call our number and somebody can look it up for you based on that information.
Can I also say, I'm with the Home Builders and Remodelers of Central New York, and all of our remodeler members were certified before the EPA standards came into effect. So check our website. There's a lot of remodeler members on there that are certified. What was that again? HBRCNY.com. HBR, Home Builder Remodeler, CentralNewYork.com.
HBRCNY.com. Yeah?
Yep, thanks, John.
Greg would like to comment. Should we give him permission?
I think the point that you brought up initially, distinguishing between a renovation and an abatement is where you're having a problem here. Abatement, in my opinion, is a terrible value because we're talking about removing a lot of things that are not significant vectors to lead exposure just because they're there and because they have a extremely remote potential of being a hazard at some point in the future. So you're not really looking for an abatement contractor. It sounds like to me you're looking for a certified renovation contractor to take care of the important things that pose the most significant risk. Can you buy that?
Thank you. I guess maybe I can ask Katie this. So I was trying to use the landlord program through Home Headquarters, and the amount, it was 2-unit property, the amount of the lead work totaled over $5,000. And I was sent back to square one and told that I couldn't use any of the contractors that I had
So the Syracuse Landlord Program is funded by HUD, and if it is over $5,000, we are required to have the supervisor for the contractor. So EPA doesn't have the amount, but they have, the de minimis level. For HUD, it does go by cost. So if it's over $5,000, then we do have to require, and that's the same with both the city and the county program as well, that they also require the supervisor contractor.
And the supervisor is at the same thing as the abate?
Right, yeah. It's where they get 4-day training, and then they also have to take a test up in Watertown and then certify themselves with EPA, which then on the EPA website, they're considered an abatement contractor.
But you won't find the individuals on there.
No, that is correct. You won't find the individuals, you'll find the company.
And then Stephanie Pascal said she'll talk to you afterwards as well, help clarify some of it for you. So she'll come and find you and stick around after.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Hi, I'm a homeowner. I don't have rental properties or anything. So, sorry. I'm looking to, I just took in my niece, she's a foster child, and I took the foster care classes, but I need help with the exterior lead paint. I didn't know, well, getting her was a situation, so I found out in 3 days I was taking in a 6-week-old. So I can't afford to have the lead taken care of myself right now at the exterior of the home. I'm working with the children's CPS and home funders to get this situated, and I'll be certified as a foster parent for her very soon. Sorry. I've already taken the classes, but I need assistance in getting the paint on the exterior done. And I don't qualify for the HUD grants.
Someone want to take that? Stephanie?
I'm sorry, let's just look at these lights.
Over there.
Oh, there you are, okay, sorry. So you're saying you don't qualify because of the income levels that were shown to you?
Correct.
I think Katie and I'd be happy to talk with you after, there are some programs and some financing through Home Headquarters that is not income dependent, although the grant component often comes in. But sometimes because this is a pretty unique situation, we can just take a look at your new family size and how that's going and see if there's a way we can connect you with that program.
Okay, because I've already had the lead department come out and do the test. And so I have all that written down, everything done. I just need, sorry. And finding a contractor, like she said, is very hard that can do the abatement for it. I called tons of people and they were only able to do certain things and tell me that I had lead paint, but they couldn't actually do the work. So I understand what she's saying about finding people. But yeah, I definitely need help with getting it done so I can keep my niece in the family.
No, sure, Katie, we're gonna climb these stairs in a few minutes and
Thank you.
we'll talk with you.
Any other questions? Nothing else? Nothing for me, I've got tons of stories to tell. I'm just kidding. All right, well, I guess if nobody has any other questions, please go check out the resource tables. Remember to stop by Home Headquarters. They do have RRP training going out for people who'd like to learn that. There's 10 of those available, 10 scholarships available. And stop and talk with Katie and Stephanie and some of the other folks who can help connect you with resources. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for